Welcome to Latam, a new chapter in a series of online events called From Home Export Days, organized by Le Bureau Export, the French music export office. My name is Benjamin de Melonester, and together with my colleagues, we've created From Home Export Days. Since May, we've been hosting panels, networking sessions, showcases, and more to keep connecting our members with international professionals and to keep international professionals up to date with what is going on in France. The previous content are now available to watch online with English subtitles on our website, so you can check Asian Limelight, tailor-made artist and label services in the UK, whether about classical music, jazz, rock, pop, electro. Check them out on From Home Export Day page. For this new chapter, focused on Latin America, we've built two panels with the help of the French Embassy in Colombia, as well as our moderators. The first panel, called Connecting, Pitching, and Storytelling for Your Projects, will start now and is moderated by Malfi Dorantes, one of the first Mexican women dedicated to the independent music promotion in Mexico. The second panel, called Getting to Grips with Sync, will take place tomorrow at 4:30 p.m. Central European Summer Time, and it will be moderated by Patricia Carrera, licensing, royalty specialist, and music supervisor at Control Freaks in Mexico. So you're most welcome to check out tomorrow's panel too, and to register for it through our website. But for now, I'm delighted to give the floor to Malfi for today's panel. Thank you very much for joining us. Take it away, Malfi.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this first panel about Latin America. As I'm Malfi Dorantes, I'm a publicist, and I am joined by a group of people that I admire. I am to mention their name, but they will introduce themselves, and also they will highlight the strength of their territory, of their interest in music import, and also they will mention the region of Latin America that they will focus on today. So I will say the names. My sound is having a little bit of an issue. Just let me know. I'm gonna try to make it a little bit better because there's bad audio and connection problems in Mexico. But you know, if you hear me better right now, is it better? Yes. Okay. I'm getting a little bit better of audio. But I'm gonna repeat real quick what the dynamics of this is going to be. I'm going to just say the names of the people that is going to. Oh yes, perfect. Sorry. Maybe Adel can help me introduce herself and also mention the territory of Latin America, which will she be highlighting. Hello.
Okay, hi everybody. My name is Adel. I run a company called D Music Marketing, based out of Miami, and we do marketing for non-Latin artists in Latin America. We focus on building a strategy and doing the rollout in a very holistic, integral way. And we're a women-led team here in Miami. We have a small team in Mexico City and a sister company in Brazil. And that's just, in short, what D Music Marketing does. And I'm going to pass now the floor to Abraham so he can introduce himself.
Thank you, Adel. Hi, everyone. Abraham here. I run a different kind of companies in the music industry. mainly two agencies. One that is mainly focused on booking, where we book different Mexican acts, and also we work with different Latin American and some European musicians as well. We take care of their bookings strategies in Mexico and in some countries of Latin America. Also, we have Altiplano. That's the agency that put the most time in. And Altiplano brings like a different variety of services into the music industry. We do management for some Mexican artists, but we also offer some consulting, marketing, merchandising, publishing services to some of our artists, but also from to artists from Europe and Latin America. So we kind of make like a custom service regarding to whatever people from overseas need in their way to get into the Mexican market. It's a pleasure to be here, and I will be passing the floor to Gustavo.
Hello, everybody. Thank you to the Bureau Export for inviting me. It's truly an honor. I'm Gustavo Mezo. I'm on the other side. I'm based in Paris, and I'm the founder and director of Monart agency. We started in 2011 doing marketing services to artists, mainly in the field of jazz and some contemporary music. In 2016, we developed the booking area with the French artists in jazz, such as Manuel Rochman. And since a couple of years, 3 years mostly, we've been developing strategies of visibility, especially in Mexico. I'm going to pass it to Luis Felipe Rios.
Hi, everyone. I'm very pleased of being here among this extraordinary group of colleagues, Mexican colleagues. I'm the only one who's not from Mexico. I'm from Colombia. I live in Bogota. I run my own company that offers label and promotion services for Latin American artists for now. My background is in management. I was a venue owner. And for the last 5 years, I've been working especially in digital promotion, DSP, audiences growth, mainly in South America, the Caribbean, and the US Latin market. I've been, I've worked with some huge names, some huge releases. Thank you again for having me here. And I hope to make really good relationships among my colleagues and all of you invitees to this panel.
So I'm gonna try. Is my sound better? Yes. Okay. So for everyone just joining us, again, thank you so much for being here. We do have one main idea that we want to carry along for this panel, which is you don't have to tour Latin America to have growth. To have a growth campaign in mind. Also, it's very important that yes, Mexico. We're losing myself again. Mexico is. We are from Mexico, 3-4 of us, but that doesn't matter. That it's not. It doesn't matter because we are not going to focus only on Mexico. Adel has a experience with Latin America, and she will share with us other objectives and other perspectives from other countries, such as, if I am not wrong, we previously mentioned we were going to mention Colombia and also Chile, right, and Ecuador. So just to know that I'm going to talk about Latin America. And obviously, our purpose for the panel is for everyone to have a checklist of all the things that you might need in order to become closer to Latin America as a part of your music campaign, and also all the things you have to that you can prepare before of touring in Latin of course, Gustavo's inflex and also opinion will help us a lot, because we will see what is need of an European artist when it comes to focusing on Latin America. So we previously noticed that there is a lack of build-up and audience build-up for this situation. So Gustavo, have you found that to be one of the problems, that a lot of artists just start doing promotions when they're going to come over to Latin America?
Hello, Malfi.
Yes, people are suggesting I'm going to turn off my camera. Maybe that will get better.
Better now. Yeah.
So, Gustavo, can you hear me right?
Yeah, it's perfect now.
Okay. So my first question would be, do you believe it's that artists plan to come over to Latin America without creating an audience before they do? And then from your answer, is it okay for you, Adel, to explain to everyone the importance of having a campaign before they try to book? And then we can take it to Abram and see how it's important to have established audience here in Latin America. And I think we're good.
Great. So I really think that we believe that building an audience, it's one of the main goals that any artist from the fields of jazz and contemporary music, I'm speaking, should be creating, thinking and planning ahead before actually doing the touring and the booking prospection, especially in Mexico. We've been seeing the other side around, right? Because me particularly and Monart, we work a lot with cultural institutions linked to the governmental organizations, and the main thing that we're not seeing is it's a process of developing an image, a storytelling of the artist. They just come in, they go out of the country without a really continuity of their projects and the projects that have been presented during a tour of 1 week or 2 weeks or whatever. I think the most important thing for European producers should be to start collaborating with media outlets, with local producers, and to, in particular, take the time to understand also the local scene, to introduce themselves in a wider spectrum.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, we usually recommend for all the artists, you know, if they have a new music or an album campaign coming, to not just think about the live, but to think of, 16, 18 months ahead of time, to build those audiences, to get the word out, to tell the story, to build the relationships, also to work with local artists, especially in the case of Brazil. But we've been lucky enough to work with a lot of French artists, which has been a real pleasure. But one of the stories I'd like to share is, for example, Petit Biscuit. We started working with Petit probably like 2 to 3 years prior his first tour to Mexico, and it was that continuous storytelling, that continuous pitching of the songs, that continuous elaboration of his work and not giving up. And then all of a sudden we had, after a long time of persisting, we had a hit. And then and he was very young, and then he came on tour, and then obviously that was a few years ago now, and now we have a new campaign, and we see all the rewards that we reaped from that beginning. With this new campaign, it has been accepted tremendously well, and it was easier for us to tell the story with DSPs and to get placement in key playlisting. It was easier for the media to embrace what he was doing, and it was easier for us to get radio across the region. So that's one great story. Another thing that's really important on the topic is the availability and the commitment from the artist to deliver creative, to deliver promo, to deliver time. We've also been working with another artist called Yell, who've been incredibly creative in the content they've been giving to media. And that has shown a tremendous acceptance. So I think we're only as good as the artist, obviously, because we're just communicating the music and connecting the audiences. But working prior to tour way before is super recommended, so that there is an audience, there is a base, and they can just keep growing from there. Right now there's a lot of virtual promo happening, which we didn't have before, and we're really taking advantage of all of the spaces that have been created, and we are creating as well. So I think that for sure, like, we can't think short-sighted. We have to think long-term, and how long does that artist want to develop and work? And truly, Latin America is an emerging market with a increasing streaming numbers that can, and tomorrow you will find out with Sync as well. But I think there's a very avid consumer, young consumer in the region, and it's very passionate consumer. And I know, Abraham, I'm going to leave you the floor now to continue talking about how that audience penetrates in the live front as well, and on your perspective as management too.
Thank you, Adel. Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's very important for people to keep in mind a couple of things. One, that Mexico City is is the capital streaming of the world. Two, that Latin America as a region has been the most growing region in music consumption for the last 9 to 10 years globally. So as you said, yes, we are a super passionate and a super eager audience to consume a lot of music in a lot of different countries. And yes, Mexico could be your gateway into this region, but the whole of America, it's an amazing place to tour and to connect throughout different countries. And yes, I love what you are saying. The thing that really helps us as bookers to really help the live development of the artist within Mexico is that constant work, months or even years before the band plans to come here for the first time. Every musician, every artist has a different reality to be able to go and pay for flights and keep on going to a country 1 or 2 or 3 times, depending on the artist flexibility of just traveling few people, or maybe they need a large crew party to make it possible. So if the artist is really willing to develop the Latin American market, it's super important to be constant, not only in presence and be able to play, but a long time in advance to be able to grow an audience, to have a market, to have a story within Mexico or other countries much longer before they come. So that really helps us. That really makes us push the offers and try to get very nice slots in festivals, in showcases, or even the possibility to connect the touring in between countries. We do need a lot of time, and we do need a lot of work from the artist into their PR, media, marketing, and all those stuff in advance. Thank you.
Malfi is asking me to take from here to talk about other territories. And what Abraham said at the beginning is very true. Mexico is a really important gateway for Latin America. It's the biggest market. But we have been seeing other territories grow really, really fast in the last years. Santiago de Chile is a stream pocket. Lima is a stream pocket. And Colombia, in fact, influences a lot what the other countries in the Andean region and the Caribbean consumes. That's why a lot of artists bet for Colombia as a gateway for South America and the Caribbean, and it's really important to work from here. we've been seeing a lot of influence from international artists that make one hit in Colombia and start charting in Ecuador, in Peru, and in Santiago, especially because what we can observe is that the local consumption from local artists in Ecuador and Peru and Chile is very low. So they are eager to consume international artists, and that's why from here and all the DSPs had an office in Colombia to work with the Andean region. That's why Colombia becomes another gateway for these markets.
Malfi, I'm going to translate for her. So the question is, which are the basic steps for a marketing campaign that will benefit future bookings in Latin America? Well, the first thing is, we need to test the waters with the music, see if the music connects. So, we take a single, that's perhaps being released in their home country or internationally, and we pitch it to the DSPs, we pitch it to media, we start to create a story with it, and then we see the reaction. And then I would say that for the French repertoire that we've been lucky enough to work, 99% of the time, it really resonates with Mexico, Colombia, Brazil, Argentina and Chile, Peru definitely, and Ecuador. These are the main markets that we're working. And then, if we see that it starts to gain some momentum, that we can continue further by, tell the story, get the artists in front of people, get the artists to build relationships with media, with the DSPs, and then fan engagement, lots of communication with fans. And then we continue from there. And then we like to work, 3 to 4 or 5 singles, the album, continue building the story, really being persistent. And eventually, we have the tour. We're lucky enough to have our sister company in Brazil called For Music. I know Nando's in the audience. And so we feel like the other thing that really works is when we do local collaborations, especially in that market. It's really important to keep that in mind to be able to enter that realm. But those are the beginning steps. It's very basic, like everywhere else in the world. We're not reinventing anything. It's just the way that we can communicate with each market, as each market speaks differently, even though we're all speaking Spanish except for Brazil. And how do we approach it in a humble way and in a way that the culture can absorb it, because we are coming in as foreigners into the market. So never underestimating the power of the local music and the power and the beauty of the local culture. And I think that, by coming in a very humble way and really being persistent with the story has really made a difference. And obviously, owning those relationships in the region.
Definitely. And I think a good point you have to keep on mind is Latin America is super vast, and it could be very exhausting if you try to approach all markets at once. So I really recommend for you guys to really take specific actions into whether you're trying to reach specifically for Mexico, or making a first bundle of Mexico, Colombia, and Chile, or Mexico, Colombia, Chile, Peru, etc., etc. So you can really start to see better results on each country before trying to get to conquer all Latin America at once. And when you finally decide into going into these markets, it's also very important to keep in mind that differently from Europeans, that maybe you have the euro for as a currency in the whole region. It gets a little bit tricky in Latin America. Not only the taxation, but also the currency exchange in between countries. Some places run on US dollars, like El Salvador or Ecuador, but the rest of the countries, they have their own currencies. And sometimes you really get less money than you thought because of all this taxation and currency differences in between each country when you're making a really big tour across the region. But I don't know, Luis Felipe, would you like to comment on this?
Well, talking from the stream revenue side, it's very frustrating sometimes because the region has been in a constant devaluation curve for the last, I don't know, 2 or 3 years, and many international artists, after investing on growing in these markets, see their income not growing at the same rhythm as they see the streams grow, and that's because all the DSPs have an arrangement, a payment arrangement that is based on local currencies. So I've had cases of releases that hit 1 million streams in a month in Argentina, and when you see the payment, it's what they used to do with 600,000 and 700,000 just months before. So it's a little frustrating on that side, and that's something to keep in mind, as you said, Abraham, when you are trying to cover this region.
Oops, my bad. So I was speaking about, everyone can hear me? Yeah, okay. I was speaking about the importance of governmental support and for touring and promotion. And in our experience in Monart and working in particular with Mexico in with jazz and contemporary improvised music, it's our main collaborator until now. However, I'll say that governmental support and subsidies should be an extra thing in our plan of action to develop the career of an artist in Mexico in particular. We need to understand in the jazz field that the governmental support give us the opportunity to be there, and then we need to embrace wider collaborations with the, I come back with media outlets in particular, and with local scenes actually. We do work with a PR agent in Mexico City when we do tours in Mexico, and we've seen the differences between going out to Mexico only with the governmental support and without, and it's really beneficial for the artists in particular at the point of having some continuity for the following years actually.
And I've been asked to elaborate on the importance of the storytelling. Right now, since lockdown, we've seen a tremendous amount of opportunity to expose music to people's homes, in people's homes. So we've been able to create promotional opportunities that were not open before when people were traveling. And I think it's a really important time to take advantage of this moment to seed music, to create loyalty with audiences. And what we've been seeing too is the artists that have been in front of people right now in the possibilities that we've acquired are actually gaining a lot of loyalty from fans, because there is this solidarity right now of providing music as a healer. And I'm going to talk in the case of Yell, where we have this incredible new campaign, and they've been super good at doing sessions in a very creative way and doing virtual promo trips. And we've seen a huge spike in their growth in the region thus far. So it is really important, you know, the promotional aspect right now is key. It's always been key. But I think there's this idea that if there's no tour, you know, why should we come? Or if we don't know when the tour will be, why should we see the music? And I'm a firm believer that if anybody has a mobile phone, there's music consumption. So, and I know that everybody in Latin America, regardless of their classes and economic status, they have a mobile phone. So we have a potential there. And our job is to try to engage people for at least 20 seconds. And then if they grasp, then 30 seconds. And then if we can get them to hear a track for a minute, we've won a consumer over. So it's really, really important.
Malfi is asking me to take to talk about how to get into playlisting, and that's the huge subject and a big question that turns around for the last years as Spotify became almost the standard, you know. So what would I say? I think I have to go to Adel's answers. You have to build a story. You have to build a fan base locally. It's very important to have something to to tell locally. It's very hard, and you know, only for Mexico, Spotify and DSPs are receiving, I think, 33,000 songs per week. So always the question is how to get the attention among that sea of content that they are receiving, and the answer is what Adel has been saying. You have to build locally, and you have to take some time and some investment to communicate and build relationship with fans and with media locally. So Spotify or any DSP will turn and see your song as something relevant to be included in the playlisting. There must be a plan that can include touring, but also digital actions and very good storytelling for the region to be included on these so precious places.
Perfect. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the importance of regionalizing the projects, or helping the artists, or maybe pushing a little bit the artists into creating a specific conversation with the Mexican or with the Latin audiences. It really helps a lot. I have some experience working with some German and Norwegian bands, such as Kak Madafaka, Kings of Convenience, The Whitest Way Alive, and these guys throughout the years, for the last maybe 8 to 10 years, they have really been working into talking directly, in this case, with the Mexican audience. How talking to the Mexican audience through different situations. For example, they have named some of the records according to experiences or some things happening in Mexico. They have been doing content or a specific promotion, talking directly to the Mexican audience. They've been hired local teams such as Malfi or people like Adel or myself to take care of their communications and the media strategies within Mexico. So maybe if you only try this once or twice, you don't get to see the result. But if year after year after year, you keep on building this relationship with the country, then the promoters start to notice, the festival start to notice, the media start to notice, and at some point, and especially like these bands that they also have a local booking agency. Because the situation is a lot of bands come to Mexico being represented by either American booking agencies or European booking agencies. So I think one of the good things about not only talking directly to the audience, but working with local teams such as my booking agency, then you really get to connect to the music industry from a different perspective, from people that get to talk day by day throughout all the opportunities that are happening in our countries, and not only doing one shots to the big festival, to the big venue, and then departure in the country. But in the other, you have to, in a way, try to make yourself feel as much Mexican and Latin as possible. Of course, every artist, every band has to find their unique way of creating this story, maybe adjusting here and there some things on their communication to make the project feel much more closer. Also, how to. Okay, one Malfi is pointing out something really, really good. A good starting point is try to find as much as possible how is Latin America, how's Mexico, how's Colombia. Unfortunately, a lot of people get an idea of how places are through the television cliches or the media cliches or just the super bad news about drug wars or whatever. That are super, super distant from the reality that the countries are experiencing. So the more you know about how's Mexico like, if you get to travel to the places, to the countries, to our continent, then it will give you also a better idea on how to permeate, how to connect with us as a market.
And in addition to, just the PR and social media, other ways to find audiences, to connect to audiences, obviously playlisting helps if you get into the right playlists in the different platforms. YouTube is still quite a big player in addition to Spotify. But also there's different lifestyle things that, we can do in a campaign that not only do the traditional PR or the traditional social media. We believe in tapping into the different lifestyles where people are not necessarily looking for music, but can hear music is a good way. Radio is still quite important in the region. And obviously, when they can travel, showcases, festivals, all of that really helps. But I believe that out of the box ideas, like tapping into perhaps the yoga world, depending on the music, or environmentals, or fashion, obviously art, cooking. There's so many ways that people live, and just tapping into those different scenarios where we can expose the music, we can create that engagement of a sound, and then Mexicans in particular are very avid at Shazamming. So they like a song, they're definitely going to use their Shazam app and try to find who it is. The beauty about Latin America is that they want to know, they will engage if they like something, which is incredibly refreshing, as I hear that doesn't happen so often in other places. So I feel like we're very lucky in that space. So there are many ways of creating audiences that don't have to rely solely on the traditional steps 1, 2, and 3, but they have to go in accordance to steps 1, 2, and 3. They can't be alienated from that. They have to work in conjunction, because otherwise you're just throwing loose cannons and you're not really gaining a full integrated campaign. I'm gonna let my colleagues continue this conversation. Maybe Luis, you want to go next? Sorry.
I'm gonna take it from here, maybe. Well, to continue with I definitely agree with Adel concerning how to develop different audiences, and especially in jazz and improvised music. One of the best things we've seen with Mexico are collaborations with local artists. Universities have been an important part of our strategy of development for this artist, since they are a lot of the times developing festivals and showcases linked to the governments from each state, and that's kind of a really interesting thing in Mexico. I will say that we also had the opportunity to work with brands, French brands that have some visibility in Mexico. Banks, we've done some events with banks that they actually hire talent, and a lot of times in jazz it's about the experience in Mexico, how you brand the artist to be part of something bigger than just a concert, and that gave us also some interesting feedback for future acts. Luis?
Sure. From I think Mexico, Colombia, and Chile and Brazil have a lot of professional encounters, showcase festivals like in Colombia, Medellin, Circular, in Bogota, the Bogota Music Market. In Mexico, there is, I know, in Guadalajara, there's one. In Brazil, there are many. Every capital city has a musical market, and these are very, very important places to be. Perhaps, well, in the ideal scenario, showcasing, but if not, the management or a booking representative should be assisting to these events. They are really important places. You get almost every one of them, at least for the Colombian ones, Circular and Bomb, they are international. So you can always meet Mexican, Peruvian, Chilean, Argentinian agents. So there are very important places to connect with local teams and local agents that could really help and make the transition to the Latin American market easier. That should be. I'm sorry, Malfi, I'm a little bit lost in your questions.
Maybe I can take it now and talk a little about. Malfi wants us to go a little bit deeper into what are maybe the wrong ideas you could get from overseas when looking into Mexico and the Latin American region. And of course, maybe I will go from the non-musical things to the musical things, but of course, I think security issues will be one of the main things that could be exaggerated outside of Mexico, outside of Latin America. And the other things will have to be of how our market is developed. Maybe some people had the idea of our countries being much more undeveloped than the reality of our countries. But I would like you to keep in mind one of the things. This platform called Polestar, well, they constantly give statistics on ticket sellings worldwide, in how promoting companies are doing worldwide. And it's very important that you keep in mind that not only Mexico, but the whole region of Latin America holds maybe 10 of the most important promoter companies in the whole world. Mexico has Ocesa, which is sometimes it's the third largest promoting company in the world. But you have many others throughout Brazil, Argentina, Colombia. And what I'm trying to do is the professionality of how the live industry works in Latin America. It's sometimes way over your expectations, and it's much more professional and warm as you will maybe thought about. My experiences touring in Europe, touring in the United States, have also made it brings me the conclusion that sometimes for example, in Bogota, with festivals such as Stereo Picnic, and in Mexico with festivals such as Pal Norte or Viva Latino, you get like much more prepared staff, amazing conditions in backstage, and the way people take care of you, treat you, help you throughout your experience in a country, etc. So please really put your stakes really high on what to expect from our countries, because we have a really cool operating promoters in throughout the region, mainly in the capital cities. That's another thing. In most of the countries, the main market it's mostly the capital city. Mexico City is a whole different thing compared to any other city in Mexico regarding of the size of the market. But you have a super amazing quality shows and festivals produced throughout our country and throughout the rest of America. But I guess the rest of my partners can complement a little bit of also what you guys think are wrong ideas of our region across the overseas, you know. This goes for Luis, and then Gustavo, and then Adel.
I agree with Abraham when you see the level of professionalism that Latin America has come to in almost every part of the business. You don't imagine that from Europe, and I think perhaps the most difficult part of the business is the publishing one. That's very difficult to handle because you have many countries with local agencies that are charged of getting your monies from the festivals and concerts, and it's really difficult. That part, as Adel and Abraham has told, it's very important to have local partners to work that out. But besides that, I can't imagine what is the European view for Latin America that we should modify. I think the curiosity of this region for Europeans is very clear. Than when I was in the Bureau Exports encounters like 2 years ago, everyone was really hoping to come and play. So I don't know. I think you have a pretty good idea of what you're looking for here.
From my point of view, in terms of from being in France and trying to export things to Mexico in the jazz field and cultural like economy, in a way, there's a huge step towards something we don't really know in terms of backlining of the production itself of this kind of events. When you are out of the big cultural events in Mexico, one of the things that we've seen, and especially it comes from the artists we work with, is also the audiences, which are extremely grateful with whatever it comes, with a lot of things that comes from Europe in terms of jazz, and we also see a lot of opportunities to develop in the field of jazz. We found out that, especially in Mexico, we can work with a lot of festivals. So a lot of festivals linked to the states and the territory itself, that it's so big that it's not well exploited in a way, and that we could manage to develop things with them, with the states, with the cultural institutions in the states, and that can give much more attraction to the public like cultural public policies of each one of the states.
I think in my view, a lot of misconceptions of Latin America have occurred when we have artists that think they have to sing in Spanish or sing in local languages to enter the market. I think there's a misconception there. I think, keep to your language that comes natural to you. Another misconception that we get also is obviously the dangerous, as have been mentioned, and And also the production. You have to come prepared, as Gustavo said, because you never know what you're going to get. The distances, people don't realize how far one country is from another. The visas, the situation, and how to get across. There's a lot of information that I think needs to be taken into account. We only have 10 minutes left, as I see, but the main one I believe is is mainly the language for us that I wanted to mention. I'm going to let Abraham take this one. How do the public consume indie folk music and world music?
Okay, I think those two genres are, I think, really coming to opposite directions. I think Mexico really has a big taste for indie folk music. Surely, like throughout the years, it's a music that I think we have consumed a lot of because of our closeness to the United States, which also produces a lot of indie folk music. So I would say maybe the world music comes in a huge other different side of the story, where this kind of music, you will find it more promoted like from the cultural side. I mean, government funded or state funded festivals or cultural institutions are the ones that promote more the side of the world music, which has their specific places. I wouldn't say the Mexicans buy too much tickets to listen to this kind of music, but they really appreciate the kind of music, and they really have and the government has created a lot of spaces for this music to happen. Compared to the indie folk, that it's much more compatible with the younger audiences and with the ticket selling platforms and festivals and venues and all that side of the industry itself. Another question?
I would agree with Abraham. I really think indie folk is very strong in Mexico. You don't see that much consumption of that genre in Colombia and the Andean region. Perhaps in Chile, you see a little bit more. And in Argentina, there are a lot of artists that are doing indie folk. So I think would be the main markets for that music would be Mexico, Argentina, and Chile. And for the world music, from the Colombian point of view, we are more producers and turn to the exports of the world music than really consumers. You have some festivals, very publicly funded by the state or by universities. I think we've been lately bringing more and more African projects to Colombia, as Colombia has a huge Afro-Colombian community and Afro-Colombian musics. So the connection is getting stronger with Africa, in particular with Ghana, Angola, Nigeria. You have some musics in the Caribbean coast that are just sisters and brothers from sounds of from Africa. So maybe that would be what I can add from to that question from the audience. We lost Adel. She is back.
Adel is back.
Sorry, guys. I lost you for a second. There was a question. Is that for me now? The next question, Malfi, about budgets, about what it costs to create a campaign. I really, it's hard to tell. It really depends. When we have a client, we really base our budgets depending on the client and what needs to happen, because we don't do just PR. So it's really hard for me to give that answer. we try to look at a marketing as a very holistic view, and we include a lot more than just PR. So I would say that it's a very personalized budget that we create depending on the client. So if you're interested, reach out to us, or any one of us, and we can definitely discuss.
Last question.
And last question. What do you recommend for artists inspired by Latin rhythms and based in the EU? Do you think it's worth it to talk with local markets in Latin regions? Well, I think so. If you really want to bring it, just I would say, whatever the creativity and art you wanna bring, even if it's inspired by American rhythms, Latin American rhythms, I think I cannot say it by myself. It has to be tested. You need to show it, to promote it, and then I guess the markets will tell about this.
I wanted to add a quick comment, Malfi, if that's okay. It's very important in general, I think, for all of us. The pandemic hasn't really hurt the streaming numbers in Latin America. I just wanted to mention that Mexico is still the #1 city, Mexico City, in Spotify as of today, and as a country, it's #3. And Brazil's still in the top 5. And I just wanted to clear that up because I know that there's a lot of question whether streaming is still strong during this time. And I just wanted to mention that as part of the marketing conversation.
Perfect, Adel. And regarding Gustavo's answer, I think it's not very common yet, but I think it will get much more common in the future that to see how European and Mexican or Latin American artists can really collaborate and make music together, especially if we're talking about European artists that are inspired by the music done in our continent. It will be really, really cool to see this new exploration and people trying to get music together from such different countries. Like I've been pushing myself a little bit of this, trying to get some Norwegian acts to work with Mexican musicians in the music making, because it's really a nicer way to get connected the markets and to bring something really different to the audiences.
Yeah, from the marketing point of view, it's one of the strongest actions you could do for promoting an artist outside of his territory. So I really recommend it, and we are here to help you to get connections with artists locally, so you can work your projects together. But from my point of view, it's really important to start doing it, because the evolution of the Latin market, and I think one of the keys of that huge growth has been the featuring and the way artists and reggaeton artists have started to cross audiences from all Latin America. So you can see how Puerto Ricans started to make music with Colombians, and then with Peruvians, Argentinians, and Chileans, and it all became one audience behind one rhythm. And that's why we saw those cases as Despacito and these huge songs that became global in a matter of months. So I really recommend to start working together with Latin and artists from all over the world.
Thank you very much. It's almost a wrap. I mean, thank you so much for participating. I hope Malfi can connect. And for those of you who saw this panel from the middle, or not just the start, I just want to give a warm cheering applause to Malfi, because it could have been strange to you that she's not speaking and all the panelists are correctly answering the question. She just managed to do that. So thank you so much. You rocked. It was difficult technically, but it was precise with the questions, with the content, with everything.
Yeah, I just got in here on mobile to see if it not worked and thank everyone that was here. And I think we really got some really good pointers for everyone. And yeah, thank you for your patience and for understanding that sometimes Mexico gets a little bit saturated with the internet.
Thank you so much. Now we'll follow on with some meetings we organize with you. And for the audience who wants to know more, tomorrow there is the next panel, same time, 4:30 p.m. or Central European Summer Time. Thank you. Have a nice day. Have a nice evening. And bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.